Hey everybody, welcome to our event tonight. It's great to see so many folks, and thank you for putting your information in the chat. It's really wonderful to see people coming from all over the country, not just from our little corner here, North County Climate Change Alliance. We use the name North County to talk about North County, San Diego, in case you're coming from far away and you're not sure which North County that is. It's North County, San Diego, California. So thank you so much for coming to join us tonight. We have two wonderful speakers. I'm going to introduce the first speaker, Ivy, and she's going to speak. And then we have a second speaker, Kat, and they will speak following. And then we will do Q&A at the end. So please put your questions in the chat as we go, because it's too easy to forget what it is that you wanted to ask. And also other people in the room may be able to help field your question or might be inspired by your question and think of another one that they'd like to ask. So it's really important, put those questions in the chat and I will cut and paste them onto a little sheet that I have here and I will track it even if it's something asked early. So thank you very much for your participation. It really helps us if you interact with our speakers. So the questions, there's no bad question. I think especially on a night like tonight, where we're talking about things that you can do, it's really important for you to just talk about things that you're hearing and they're making you think, oh, wait, did I get that right? Or am I doing this right or wrong? Or what do you think? What are your opinions? Those are all things that we should be able to discuss tonight. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Ivi Kubica is a strategic marketing leader, passionate about sustainability, marketing sustainable brands, and addressing climate change. She holds a master's degree in business from Golden Gate University in San Francisco and a bachelor's degree in environmental economics and policy from the University of California, Berkeley. Ivy currently resides in Vista, and it's her mission to help protect the natural environment for the next generation, including her 7-year-old son, and for all those who will come after. So Ivy, if you'd like to start your presentation, thank you.
Thank you, Carl. I'm honored to be here with all of you this evening. I spent the early years of my life in the Czech Republic, often wandering in deep forests, discovering secluded lakes, expansive meadows, and bubbling rivers. And I loved taking pictures of the beautiful natural environment that was all around me. And I believe that it was these early encounters with nature that sparked my lifetime love for our beautiful natural environment and my desire to protect it. As we know, climate change is the biggest threat we humans face today, and carbon production is the largest contributor to climate change. It is my mission to help address this growing problem. And I would like to ask you now, where on the scale of 1 to 10 do you feel you are in terms of your awareness of what you can do to reduce your carbon footprint? And please type that in the chat. I see a good mix here. A lot of 6, 7, 8, some 4, 5. Thank you all so much sharing. In our talk today, we will cover transportation, shopping, heating and cooling, other home energy uses, and food as the top 5 sources of carbon production of the average American. And we'll go over what we can do to reduce our carbon footprint in these areas. Did you know that the carbon footprint of the average American is 16 tons per year, one of the highest in the world? And to help you understand how much 16 tons of CO2 actually is, imagine one Olympic-sized swimming pool and now multiply that by 3.5, and that's how much 16 tons of CO2 actually is. So that is the amount of carbon footprint of the average American per year. Now, globally, the average carbon footprint is 4 tons, which is only 25% of the carbon footprint of the average American. To avoid a 2°C rise in global temperatures, to prevent tens of millions more people worldwide to be exposed to life-threatening coastal floods, heat waves, and water shortages, the average global carbon footprint per year needs to drop to under 2 tons by 2050. That means that the carbon footprint of the average American needs to drop from 16 to 2 tons per year by 2050. And I'm curious, which one of the following categories do you think contributes to the highest carbon footprint of an average person in the United States? Is it food? Is it shopping, transportation, heating, ventilation and cooling, or other home energy uses? And I'm going to share with you a poll where you can vote. Please note that the voting is anonymous. And I'm going to pull up the poll now. And please go ahead and vote. All right, so these are the results. So we are leading with transportation, followed by food, heating, ventilation, and cooling. Here is a graph that describes carbon footprint of the average person in the United States per category. And we can see here that transportation contributes the most to carbon footprint of the average person in the United States with 28%. So those of you who have voted for transportation as the #1 source, you were right. Next is shopping with 26%, followed by heating, ventilation, and cooling with 17%. Then come home energy uses, other than heating, ventilation, and cooling with 15%. And finally, we have food that contributes 14% of the carbon footprint of the average person in the United States. And this leaves us with the big question. What can we do to reduce our carbon footprint to create a healthier, more sustainable planet? And before we dive into the tips to reduce our carbon footprint, I would like us to really acknowledge the things that we all are already doing to help create a healthier, more sustainable planet. So please take a moment and reflect on all the things that you are already doing, and please drop that in the chat. And I would like us to really take some time to celebrate this. I, for example, already recycle. I use reusable shopping bags, and I walk instead of drive as much as I can. I also order perfectly imperfect food online that would have been otherwise thrown away, and we will talk more about that during our presentation. So please type in the chat all the amazing things that you are already doing to protect our planet. I see a lot of things around food, hybrid garden beds, more food, transportation, food, agriculture, bike to work. I love that. Riding an e-bike in place of a car, EV car, solar panels, recycling, eco-friendly home, not using animal products, off-grid solar home. I love that. Work from home. Drive a hybrid.
Camera off the audio.
So many amazing things here. Thank you all so much. And really, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say a huge thank you for all your mindful actions to help us protect our planet. I truly appreciate it. So as we saw in the earlier graph, transportation is the largest source of carbon emissions in the United States, with cars being our biggest polluters, which is a no surprise, with the typical passenger vehicle emitting about 5 tons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere every year. So here are the tips to reduce your carbon footprint from transportation. The tip number 1 is use an electric car if you can. Electric cars not only produce no CO2 emissions when driving, they also give us cleaner streets, making our towns better places to live. And they have been significantly improving. Today, batteries of electric cars range up to 300 miles for cars like the Tesla Model S and Model X. Additionally, the number of electric vehicle public charging stations continues to grow. And here in the San Diego County alone, we have now over 900 electric vehicle public charging stations to choose from. The second tip is to choose a fuel-efficient car if you are looking for a car, but you're not yet ready for electric one. Choose a car with the least amount of emissions. You can visit the EPA's Green Vehicle Guide at epa.gov/green vehicles to learn which cars have the smallest carbon footprint. And even if you're not currently looking for a new car, when you rent a car next time, please consider renting an electric car, a hybrid, or another fuel-efficient car. Next, consider the way you drive. Did you know that rapid acceleration and rapid braking use up to additional 40% of fuel, according to the US Department of Energy? So by gentle acceleration and gentle braking, you can save up to 40% of fuel, and you can reduce dramatically your carbon footprint related to driving. The next tip to reduce your carbon footprint from driving includes combining trips when you can. When you run errands, think ahead to minimize driving. What trips can be combined? And even if you do not get the miles that you drive by combining trips, operating a car with a hot motor has far better fuel efficiency than operating a cool car. Next, consider walking, jogging, or biking whenever you can to not only reduce your carbon footprint, but to also get some refreshing exercise and to replenish your mind. Lastly, reduce your need for air travel as much as you can. Did you know that just one-way flight from San Francisco to London creates twice as much CO2 than using a car for a full year? Also, consider choosing nearby vacation locations and pack light, as the heavier the airplane is, the more fuel it needs. In fact, if all passengers packed one less pair of shoes, or roughly 2 pounds, the airplane's fuel savings would be the same as taking about 10,000 cars off the road for an entire year. And if you can, take direct flights, as takeoff and landing are the most fuel-intensive parts of a flight. So the less connections you make, the lower your carbon footprint. The second category, the second largest category of contributor to the CO2 of an average American is shopping. And this category includes our consumption of clothing, furniture, electronics, and other home and hobby-based products. Out of these shopping subcategories, the fashion industry alone creates about 10% of annual global carbon emissions. And at the current pace, the fashion industry's greenhouse gas emissions will surge by 50% by 2030. And let's see if you can guess how resource-intensive production of clothing actually is. If you were to guess, how many gallons of water do you think it takes to produce one pair of jeans, I'm going to pull up a poll that will show up on your screen. So please go ahead and vote. And again, the voting is anonymous. All right, so here are the results of the poll. So it seems that 638 is leading here. Well, you may be surprised by the fact that it actually takes almost 1,000 gallons of water to make a pair of jeans and 75 pounds of carbon emissions. And that is for just one pair of jeans. And you can also see that the production of clothing has rapidly increased over the last 60 years, with the vast majority of clothing ending up in landfills. Sadly, only about 15% of clothing is actually recycled. The rest is either dumped into our landfills or it is burned. So what can we do to reduce our carbon footprint from shopping? Well, one obvious way is to buy less. Try to buy fewer high-quality items that will last over many cheaply produced ones that you may need to often replace. Fix, reuse, and donate items as much as you can. I, for example, like to reuse old t-shirts for cleaning my home, and I periodically donate to Goodwill items that I no longer need. The second way to reduce your carbon footprint from shopping is to repair items or buy refurbished items such as electronics. Today, you can buy almost any electronic gadget refurbished, including desktops, laptops, tablets, smartphones, TVs, and even digital cameras. These electronics are often items that people returned because they have changed their mind, but they can no longer be sold as new. So you get the advantage of getting a fully functioning item for a reduced price, which can be sometimes as little as half the price that you would pay for a new item. And you also get often a full warranty and the same customer support that you would get with a new item. I, for example, love buying refurbished items. My MacBook Pro that I bought refurbished back in 2015 still runs strong today, which confirms that buying refurbished items can be a really solid choice. Lastly, consider joining the Buy Nothing movement. A very simple way you can participate is by joining your local Buy Nothing Facebook group. You can go to Facebook and simply search for Buy Nothing in your city. I know that there are Buy Nothing groups in Vista, in Carlsbad, in Encinitas, San Marcos, and all the other towns in the North County. And in these groups, you can gift others what you no longer need, and you can get free items that you may be wanting or needing. Leveraging these Buy Nothing Facebook groups is an effective way to reduce your carbon footprint while also building a local community. The third largest contributor of the average American to CO2 is heating, ventilation, and cooling, accounting for around 17% of total carbon footprint of the average American. Heating and cooling of our homes alone releases 441 million tons of CO2 every year. Here are a few ways to reduce your carbon footprint from cooling and heating your home. The first tip is to change the air filters in your home frequently. It is recommended that they are changed every 90 days and 60 days if you have pets, since if the air filters are clogged, they will block airflow and could use up to 15% more energy to blow cold and hot air in your home. The second tip is to use blinds and drapes to either keep the hot air out on a warm day or to keep warm air in on a cold day. And according to the US Department of Energy, blocking the sun in the summer and keeping the heat in winter using blinds and drapes can save you up to 33% of energy, which is significant. Lastly, stop air leaks in your home if you can, and you can save up to 15% of energy according to the EPA. And so this can be another very efficient way to reduce both your energy bill and your carbon footprint. Home energy, other than heating, ventilation, and cooling, is the fourth largest contributor of the average American to CO2, accounting for 15% of the total carbon footprint. One obvious way to reduce your carbon footprint from energy use in your home is to use LED light bulbs, which require up to 90% less energy and last up to 25 times longer than traditional light bulbs. The second way to reduce your carbon footprint from energy use in your home is to choose Energy Star certified appliances if you are currently looking for new appliances, as they save 10 to 50% of energy according to the US Department of Energy. The third way to reduce your carbon footprint from energy in your home is to run a full dishwasher on the most efficient cycle and air dry instead of heat dry your dishes to save up to 50% of energy. Next, wash full loads in your washing machine and use cold water to save up to 75 to 90% of energy, which is the amount of energy it takes to warm up the water. And studies show that the majority of clothes will get perfectly washed in cold water. And as an extra bonus, by washing your clothes in cold water, you will prevent shrinking and fading of colors. Next, make sure that the temperature set for your refrigerator is between the recommended 36 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and the temperature set for your freezer is between the recommended 0 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, as keeping your fridge or freezer at a lower temperatures will consume extra energy. Similarly, please check to make sure that your hot water tank is set to the optimal temperature of 120 degrees Fahrenheit instead of the factory default of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which leads to additional energy consumption and additional unnecessary carbon footprint. The last category, food, is the fifth largest contributor of the average American to CO2, accounting for 14% of the total carbon footprint. Let's take a minute now to see if you can guess which food generates the greatest amount of CO2e per pound. Is it rice, carrots, beef, chicken, or pork? I'm going to bring up a poll, so please go ahead and vote. And once again, the voting is anonymous.
And conservatives on the Supreme Court.
Okay, thank you. Here are the results. All right, so I'm pleased to see that many of you are sharing voting for beef, and you're absolutely right. As you can see here on the graph, beef generates by far the greatest amount of CO2e per serving of food. In fact, one serving of beef generates astonishing 6.61 pounds of CO2e as compared to carrots, for example, that generate only 0.07 pounds, or rice, that generates only 0.16 pounds. So just as our moms told us when we were growing up to eat our vegetables, it is still true today to eat our vegetables because it benefits not only our health and our well-being, but it also helps the planet. And if you do need to eat meat, you can see in this graph that chicken and pork are much better in terms of their carbon footprint, as chicken, for example, generates only 1.26 pounds of CO2e per serving, and pork only 1.72 pounds, as compared to beef that generates staggering 6.61 pounds of CO2e per just one serving. And sadly, meat and dairy alone account for around 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. One way to reduce your carbon footprint from food is to use sustainable sources of protein. Consider replacing meats and dairy products with peas, lentils, tofu, and beans. By being a vegetarian, you can reduce your carbon footprint from food by 50%. And if you're not yet ready to become a vegetarian or vegan, consider replacing beef with chicken or pork. As we saw on the earlier graph, the production of chicken and pork creates only about 25% of CO2e as compared to the production of beef. Lastly, reduce your food waste. According to the NRDC, 40% of food in the United States goes uneaten. You can help address this problem by buying only what you need, freezing your leftovers so you can eat them later, and shopping for food that may not meet the strict cosmetic standards that grocery stores have, and as a result be thrown away. There are companies like Imperfect Foods that I personally use weekly, where you can buy this type of food online and it will be delivered to your door. By eating nutritious, often organic food that would have been otherwise thrown away, you are helping to reduce your carbon footprint, contributing to a healthier planet, and ultimately helping to address climate change. As we are entering the year 2022, my question and my invitation to you is, what is one additional thing you can do in the first quarter of this year to reduce your carbon footprint? And let's share our ideas and our commitments among each other to inspire, motivate, and empower one another. So please drop in the chat what you plan to do in the first quarter of this year. My commitment is to look for more clothing for my 7-year-old son in online secondhand stores, so that I am reusing and reducing the amount of things that end up in landfills. I'm also going to stay local for my time off rather than flying somewhere by an airplane. And luckily, there is a myriad of beautiful places here close by where we can go, like Idlewild, Lake Arrowhead, and Borrego Springs. So please type in the chat what you plan to do in the first quarter of this year. I'm going to pull up the chat here. Casey, eat less meat, consume less, buy fewer clothes, install new ground mount solar array so I can charge my plug-in hybrid car at home, buy less, avoid animal products, building a cargo e-bike made out of bamboo. This should be a good car replacement for grocery shopping. Use grow boxes for veggies, moving my banking out of my current bank, which funds fossil fuels. Go vegan, trend vegan, donate more on buy nothing so I can enable others to do less shopping. I love that. Get back to composing again. Donate more Restart the NCCCA Fix It clinic. Love that. Eat less meat, less beef, buy less, use buy nothing group, stop using plastic bags. So many amazing commitments, directing unneeded items for more certain reuse. Replace my oil-fueled boiler with geothermal. Amazing. Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing all these different ideas and really making these amazing commitments here. I am truly grateful for you taking these important next steps. And please help us spread the word and invite others to join us. I have created an ebook with 21 tips to reduce carbon footprint. Please go ahead and grab your free copy now. Simply visit gettalk.at/carbon. Once you request the ebook there, it will be emailed to you. And please share this ebook with your friends and with your family. I believe that together we can change the world. We may begin with taking smaller steps one at a time, but these steps add up. And there is this beautiful ripple effect when you empower more people. They may choose to empower additional people. And then just like with a drop of water in a pond, the ripple effect grows and grows and becomes larger and larger. As the American cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you all so much for your time and for your attention today. Please stay in touch. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, you can email me, or you can visit my website. And if you are part of any organization that you think may benefit from this talk, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to connect with you and speak with you about how we can together move this message forward. Also, if you could please complete a short feedback survey, I would very much appreciate it. Marianne will now kindly drop the link in the chat. Thank you so much, Marianne. And please note that the survey is anonymous unless you choose to share your name. By completing the survey, you will help me to optimize this presentation to make it as impactful and as effective as possible. Again, thank you all so much for your time and for your attention today. And with that, I will turn the mic over back to Carl.
Thank you very much, Ivy. That was fantastic. I think you paced that just right, because you cover a lot of important ground, and I already picked up a lot of cool tips, and I've been doing this work for a number of years as well. So thank you so much for that. Our next speaker is Dr. Kat Russell. Climate action maps were developed by Dr. Russell in 2002. Kat loves the cool climate of the Colorado foothills where they live, and their connection with the wildlife, trees, and outdoor activities there inspired them to move towards a zero carbon lifestyle as quickly as possible and to enable others to do so as well. Dr. Russell's educational background includes NABCEP certification in PV system design from Solar Energy International, a PhD in laser and optical engineering from UC Santa Barbara, a BS in electrical engineering, in electrical and electronics engineering, as well as a BA from the University of Texas at Austin. Kat taught climatology at the high school level for 17 years. As part of implementing their own climate action steps, they changed careers and now work as a PV design engineer with over 500 kilowatts of installed PV systems. Kat received training through the Climate Reality Leadership Corps and regularly gives presentations on the climate crisis, as well as volunteering to families, individuals, and organizations an organization helps organizations map their climate actions. And Kat uses the pronouns they, them, theirs. So Kat, if you'd like to go ahead with your presentation, please. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Sorry, I didn't start at the beginning of my presentation. Here we go. So this presentation is about climate action maps, and I'm hoping that you've been taking notes during Ivy's beautiful presentation, because I'm sure there was at least one thing that you had not thought of before, and I'm hoping that you've got a little place that you could note down some things that you'd like to implement in your own life. As Ivy pointed out at the beginning of her presentation, we have a huge project ahead of us as a species, and especially as Americans. We all need to be doing everything that we can. And that means not just doing one thing, but organizing a lot of different changes in our lives. If we're going to make the scope of changes that we need to make in the next decade, we all need to be doing a lot of different things. So climate action maps are a way of organizing all of those different steps that you'd like to take. So it's not just one thing here and one thing there, but what's my entire plan for how I'm going to reduce my climate impact. So the graphic here just gives you a little idea of what a climate action map looks like. And I also have at the bottom of the slide, the website climateactionmaps.org, easy to remember. This is how you can access a lot of the information in this talk, and also how you can connect with me later if you want to. So I like to start with this quote from Greta Thunberg, because it can be very depressing. A lot of people in Greta's generation, but also in my generation, are really aware of what the complete scale of this problem is. And as many of you have been putting in your in the chat, you know, it can be depressing to look at the political situation and not see the kinds of collective action that we'd like to see. But I love her statement that really the antidote to depression is action. The only thing that we can do to make ourselves feel better and also to solve the problem is to act. So here's the graphic again. So this is what a climate action map looks like. And it's or for any kind of group. So it could be a church, it could be a company, it could be a nonprofit. So how does a climate action map work? Well, we've got an image in the center, and that image will be something that motivates us to act. So I've got the blue marble in the center of this particular graphic because I was trained by Al Gore, and that's the image that motivates his action, is that beautiful image of the Earth from space that was taken back in the 1970s that first allowed us to see the Earth as an organism. But for you, it might be an image of your grandchildren. It might be an image of the lifestyle that you're wanting to create. So just think, what's a motivating image that you might use for the middle of your map? And then we'll have pathways, and these pathways will lay out the steps that we'll take to reduce our carbon footprint. So my iconic map has 7 pathways. So each climate action pathway goes from the past to the future. and is in a category area. So for example, you might have a category of electric power generation. Maybe you're going to put solar on your roof. So you've got an area of action there where you're going to work on your electric power generation and how much carbon you're putting out that way. Food might be another category, or you might be looking at fire risk mitigation in the San Diego area and also in Colorado. That's a big deal, and it's related to climate. So just be thinking of what might be some category areas, perhaps as many as 7 different areas that you might be taking actions in this year. So in order to create, so here's how we're going to create a climate action map. Start taking some notes. If you've got a little piece of paper, you might even start kind of sketching something. So first you want to connect with your heart motivation to act. So what is it really that's motivating you to be here and think about changing your lifestyle in order to fix this problem? Is it awareness of extinctions? Is it love of wilderness? Is it particular activities? Is it the fact that you have grandchildren? Just check in with yourself. What's your heart motivation to do this? Because that's really what's going to take you from being aware of the problem to being willing to make actual changes in your lifestyle. So again, maybe it's the awareness of the entire planet. Maybe it's your cat. How do you feel when you consider how the climate change is threatening the beings that you love? And I know that it can be easy to feel helpless or depressed or sad. But I'm going to ask you to tap into that, what I think of as like the mother bear instinct. You know, think about your grandchildren, think about the wildlife that you love, and tap into that protective feeling, that angry, fierce, determined feeling. We need to do something. And it's not going to help to be sitting around feeling depressed or helpless. So let's tap into that fierce, determined feeling that we actually can solve this problem. We have what we need. We just need to all get in there and do what we can. Okay, and then again, think about what types of changes you or groups that you might be in, you might be thinking about doing a map as a group, might be willing to make. Topic areas like the ones that Ivy talked about. But this isn't really necessarily so much about what the average American does. This is about you particularly, or your group. What are the things that you could change? Are you willing to change your transportation? Are you willing to change your food? Different people have different abilities to change things, and it's not so much about which one is going to be the most impactful. It's about which one are you willing to, which areas are you willing to actually change? Okay, so I want to just give a couple of ideas about effective action steps. Ivy gave so many good suggestions that I just want to add some that maybe she didn't mention. So I'm going to start out with efficiency. And one of the things that is different about this country from other countries is that we tend to live in much larger houses. And so no matter how you heat your house, the fact that it's 5 times as big as the houses of someone in Russia or China means that we're using so much more energy. So one possibility, and it's one that I've implemented in the last year, is to move into a smaller house so that you need less energy. Another wonderful way to reduce the climate footprint of your house is to go to electric heat. So heat pumps and mini splits are much more efficient than they used to be. And so it's electrification is actually a good first step if you're trying to reduce your climate footprint. Then of course you have to think about where is your electricity coming from and reduce the climate footprint of your electricity. We're getting to it. Climate action maps are coming. Okay, so planting a garden is another suggestion that Ivy didn't mention. And this is a wonderful way to reduce your climate footprint. And hanging your clothing out to dry. Another suggestion, I noticed people were interested in airline suggestions. Low-cost airlines use a lot less fuel because they fly their planes full. And so per passenger, they save energy if you fly. Another suggestion that I wanted to make that Ivy didn't mention was planting trees. Carbon sequestration is another important step that we need to take. And finally, activities that don't use carbon dioxide. If you play music or do art, that can be time well spent that doesn't use more carbon. Okay, so I want to jump into showing you what a climate action map looks like. Here's an example of a hand-drawn climate action map for a family. So you can see that there are different areas. If you look closely, you'll see there's a path for food, there's a path for recycling, there's a path for clothing, there's a path for heating. So this is an example of an action map for a family, similar to the first one that I did back in 2002. And again, it's got that attractive image in the middle. So for each of these paths, if I zoom in, you can see that you go from the outside edge of the map is the past or a worst case. So for example, in clothing, maybe the worst case is dry cleaning, and then steps on this path towards the middle, buy durable clothes, hang them to dry, and best case is the old sleeves. Okay, so here's another example of a hand-drawn climate action map. This was done during a meeting of the resilience team for my town. And so a town might have different category areas than a family would. We still had transportation, but we also had a local economy where we were talking about different things that we could do in the local economy that would work to reduce our climate impact. Okay, so at this point, I would like to show you some example climate action maps that are on my website. It's kind of the next step in climate action maps. So give me a sec. I can find my cursor here so I can stop sharing. And switch. Okay, so here is a climate action map that represents my current project. My partner and I are shown in the middle, creating a fun lifestyle here up in the mountains of Colorado. And so this is called the Climate Friendly Mountain Home Project. So we bought an off-grid cabin a year ago, and it's half the size of the house that we were living in before, and as I mentioned, it's off grid. So as you can see on this map, we've got 7 different category areas. Oh my gosh, stop that. Hang on a sec. Microsoft chose that moment to try to update my systems. All right, so I've got 7 different areas here. There's electric power, there's work and play, there's heat, there's landscaping and food, there's clothing, there's transportation, and there's reduce, reuse, and recycle, which is a lot of different initiatives that we're doing around things like reducing packaging and reducing shopping. So each one of these different steps along these paths represents a whole area of action that we're taking. So, and they're loosely speaking chronological. So going from the past at the outer end of each of these pathways towards the future in the middle. And all of these are things that we're working on this year. As a climate scientist and a solar engineer, we're quite focused on this as our, so we're doing a lot of different things at once. So I just want to focus on a couple of them and show you some things that you might not have thought about. And I also would like to pull up the chat for myself so that I can see what you're saying. Hang on a sec. Chat disappeared for me. All right. I'm gonna go back. Okay. So I'd like to just invite you to throw into the chat any of these different topic areas that you would be interested in my clicking through and telling you more about. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you about climate-friendly refrigeration. This is an area that people don't tend to think about, but it is actually the #1 impactful action that we can do based on the Project Drawdown analysis, which is many of you may be familiar with already. It's a wonderful website for looking for ideas on how to reduce your climate footprint. So, refrigeration, refrigerators have refrigerants in them, and you may be aware that refrigerants, the CFC refrigerants, which were used until recently, were destroying the ozone layer. So we've switched to hydrofluorocarbon refrigerants, which turn out to be, they're inert as far as the ozone layer goes, but they're very potent greenhouse gases. So the refrigerant that is in your refrigerator, when at the end of the refrigerator's life, if it's not captured and it is released into the atmosphere, is a very long-lasting chemical that contributes to global warming. So most of the rest of the world has been using hydrocarbon refrigerants, which are 0 global warming potential, for quite a while, but the US is behind, and they're just now being introduced into the US. So you can get 0 carbon potential or 0 global warming potential refrigeration in this country, but it's difficult. You can't find it on the website. It's not in the description of the refrigerator. You actually have to look at the label inside the refrigerator. So what you're looking for is you want to look for R600A, which is the technical term for the hydrocarbon refrigerant, which is 0 global warming potential. So if you look at your refrigerator, it will say somewhere where on the label where the refrigerant is. Here it says refrigerant R600A. And I think it's isobutane. Somebody's asking if it's propane. It's similar to propane. So anyway, we got an R600A refrigerator, And it was fairly hard to find, but actually it was inexpensive. It was the right size for our small kitchen, and it works great. So that's something that you might not have been aware of. All right, somebody said, what is Buy Nothing Community? So I'm going to go back to my map and jump into the Buy Nothing community. So the Buy Nothing community is a Facebook group. It's also going into being an app. And what it is you have a group in your local community. And in my case, I started one in my community because there wasn't one already, but most communities like San Diego, there's already going to be one in your neighborhood. And it's a way for people to share skills as well as things that you're ready to let go of. So it's basically a free giveaway, and you just post, I tried this shampoo bar and I didn't like it. Anybody want to try it? And then somebody will say, hey, yeah, I want to try that kind. And so you just give it to them. So you just post pictures of things. This is a picture of one of our neighbors showing us how to use a saw. It's also a great way to share skills as well as things. Let me pull up the chat again. Anything else that you're interested in? And then I can't easily remove the snowflakes, I'm sorry. That's in the background of the website. But I can zoom in to try to reduce it if it's a problem. Okay, so I want to show you maybe one more of these. So I just wanted to give you the idea. So what I'm doing with these climate action maps on the website is showing different examples of an individual or a household or an organization and what all of their different actions are. You can make one of these maps for yourself. And also I'm collecting volunteers who are willing to put their actions online to motivate and inspire other people. So Marion in this group is one of the people who's volunteered, and I want to show her map, which we're just getting started on. It doesn't have all the articles linked to it yet, but I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of how the actions of different families may differ, but what's important is that we're doing what we can do in our context. So in a sec, and I am going to pull up Marion's map. There we go. So I'm calling this one Climate Friendly Southern California Semi-Rural Home Project. Just a descriptor for where she is. This is her husband and grandchildren in the middle. So that's the motivating image. And their topical areas are the same in some places. They also have electric power, and they have reduce, reduce, recycle. They have transportation and clothing and heat. But they have some really different, interesting actions that they're taking. For example, Steve is working on a wildfire smoke alarm system, which I'm really interested in implementing at my house as well. They're going to be upgrading their heat pump. My house has radiant floor passive solar heating, so it's a different way of reducing the climate footprint of our heating. They're implementing something that makes sense in their context. They're moving toward a vegan diet. That isn't something that I'm able to do, but it's so you can see how we can have different actions in these areas and be making impacts in the way that we can. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to my other presentation. Sorry, it takes so many clicks to do this. It's very cumbersome. Okay, so what are the steps to creating your own climate action map? First, you'll choose your heart image, then you'll choose your categories, and then you'll choose your action steps in each category. You draw and label those pathways. So again, they go from the outside of the paper towards that attractive image in the middle. Doesn't matter how many of them you do or how you orient them. You add steps to your pathways. These are the things that you're committing to doing. And then you start taking action steps. You can also use this to show where you are and where you got to and get kind of a qualitative idea of how you've reduced your carbon footprint. So for more information, or if you'd like to schedule a free training for your organization, I can walk you through, or your family, how to set up your own map. Please visit my website at climateactionmaps.org.
Thank you, Kat. That was fantastic. Such a different way of organizing thoughts. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are out there thinking, okay, I've got to try this. And I've got to do it before I forget all the cool things that Kat had already put on her, on their map. So let's make sure that we go to that website, and that's where we will get inspiration to get started. All right, let's try to field some questions, because I've been stacking up some questions during both of your presentations. Let me start with one that Barbara asked about yield signs. Something came up, Ivy, in discussing cars and driving, and Barbara was asking, should we be installing yield signs instead of stop signs? Has that ever come up in any of your, and actually this is a question that either of you can field. Do you know anything about, in terms of transportation, should we be remaking our roads a little bit to not have to stop our cars?
That's a really good question. Do we have any engineers here, civil engineers, that may be able to answer this? I mean, to me, it's logical, right? I mean, if you have to stop the car, you have to then restart it again, and most people can see quite clearly whether there are any cars approaching. So logically, it would make sense. I'm not sure though where we are with that in terms of actually implementing that. Kate, would you have any insight into that?
You know, those of you who are really interested in activism and in trying to implement public policy like that, you might want to put a pathway on your map that talks about all of the ways in which you're going to advocate for changes like that. The reason that I focused on the map being personal changes is that we are the decision makers for our household decisions. And so if we can focus on the things that we can change, then of course we also want to try to influence the changes that others are making. But first we've got to work on the things that we can do. So roundabouts are great, but I don't have the personal choice of whether or not we have roundabouts.
That's a great suggestion, Kat, that you know, if you think of things and then you realize, I don't know enough about that, but I bet there's people that do know about that. That's your opportunity to go out there and start learning about it, and then find those people that will need that support. So Barbara, it was a good question. I actually happen to know the answer to that one. And yes, roundabouts are definitely an advantage to stopping. It's also true with bicycling. Believe it or not, it takes more energy to have to stop at every intersection. And so roundabouts help folks that are cycling to make more ground with less energy. And so when we're setting up cycling infrastructure, we also try to think that our way through that situation to make sure that we're making it more conducive to travel that way. So good instinct. Stefan asked, don't we need to reach zero carbon footprint?
Yes. And by 2035. The situation's getting worse the longer that we don't act. So all of those suggestions of doing it partially are quickly becoming obsolete. We need to make all the changes we can make as rapidly as we can do it.
Yeah, what Ivy shared in those slides should stop everyone in their tracks. The amount of carbon footprint that we each hold is not only not sustainable, it's not even near-term sustainable. We are burning through tomorrow's budget today. And I really like, Ivy, how you described shopping as a key, because we have to really be thinking about everything that we purchase, not just maybe what we would think of as disposable income, frivolous shopping, but also what's the impact of everything that we're buying? And can we buy a coffee machine that will last 25 years? And the answer is yes, but typically folks are buying coffee machines that are made out of plastic and only last a few years. So sometimes really putting your mind towards like true sustainability on every single purchase that you make, and really the life cycle analysis of anything that you buy. So, and I appreciate what you said there, Kat, about a refrigerator, and finding one that had a refrigerant that not many people are thinking about right now, but that was great. And I know there's also heat pumps that are using CO2, and so things are stepping in the right direction, but they need our influence as consumers to go out there and ask for these things. That helps a lot.
Another suggestion that if you're interested in zero packaging and homemade soaps and things like that, I have a bunch of recipes on my climate map. So when you go to that climateactionmaps.org, go to my climate friendly mountain home project, and you'll find recipes for homemade soap and for homemade deodorant and for homemade moisturizer, which are better than anything you can buy in the store and don't come in plastic packaging. So there's all kinds of things we can do. And one of the points that I wanted to make was that my partner and I have committed to both having more fun, having a better lifestyle, and also reducing our climate impact dramatically. So, being able to hike out my back door in the snow is not only a zero carbon footprint activity, but it's also delightful. And making my own deodorant is not only a carbon-free way to do it, or relatively carbon-free way to do it relative to buying that plastic deodorant and throwing it out every other week. It's also better. It works better and it smells better. So I'd like to just invite you to think about, as Ivy said in her talk, ways of improving your lifestyle at the same time as you're reducing your carbon footprint.
Kat, while we're on that subject, I was wondering, do you have any fun anecdotes about going off grid in your cabin?
Oh my gosh. Oh yes, so many. Let's see. Well, I think maybe one of the most entertaining was when we first moved in, the person who lived here before us was a single guy, and he was actually using an ice box He didn't even have a refrigerator, and we still only have 2.4 kilowatts, which anybody who has a solar electric system, you'll know that's a very small amount of generation. So we're working on adding another 5 kilowatt array, but we don't have it in yet. So we've had to get really creative so as not to run out of power, because we have 2, and right now we have 3 because my college student kid is home as well, because her school didn't go back in session. So we have 3 people living in a cabin with only 2,400 watts. So one of the things that we learned was, in this climate, the garage is a wonderful refrigerator in the wintertime. So when it starts freezing and the garage drops below 40 degrees, it stays around 35 to 40 degrees all winter. We shut down the refrigerator, we wipe it down, close it, and for the next 7 months, we have a metal cabinet in the garage that is the refrigerator. And the interesting thing about that, it takes zero energy to run it. And also the food actually keeps better in that cabinet than it does in the refrigerator. So that was kind of an interesting anecdote. We've had to get creative in a number of ways.
Yeah, I mean, folks, I think one of the great takeaways that we can get from that message is this can be an adventure too, right? It's scary as hell to think that we're going to get to zero carbon. I mean, we're talking about, I'm gonna be blunt with you folks. You're not gonna be able to buy electric cars in 2050. We're just not gonna have the carbon budget to be able to do that. I know a lot of people think that's the way of the future, but to get to zero carbon, the manufacturing is going to have to be so low that we'll have to really think our way through being really adventurous about how we do things with really low touch. So, Kat, I appreciate what you're describing there. These are the things that we have to sort of start to grapple with, is really big changes in our lifestyles. So the climate action map can be really powerful in helping to give ourselves some kind of guideway to understand, okay, this year it's this, but during my long progression, it turns into something much different. And maybe that's okay. Like I said, it's an adventure. So
yeah, some other things that we learned, and again, you can find all of this on my climateactionmaps.org website. We've had to figure out what are the lowest energy use ways to cook, because my partner has a chemical injury. We cannot use fuel in our house. We can't have a gas stove because she can't be around the combustion products of propane. So we have an electric stove, but we don't always have the electric power to run it. So we've learned, for example, that you can cook potatoes in an instant pot in a fraction of the time that it takes to cook them on the stove. And you can cook a pizza in a toaster oven for a fraction of the power that it takes to heat the oven. And it works just as well. It's just a question of learning the lowest impact ways to cook. A microwave oven is more efficient than boiling water on the stove, for example. So all of these tips are on my website if you're interested.
that's awesome. Okay, I'm going to go back to some questions because I don't want to miss the chance to field some of the questions that we had asked folks to give to you all. Leslie asked, where does fish fall in terms of the relative emissions for food? Ivy, do you have any idea if fish is up there with meat and dairy, or?
That's a good question. I'm not sure specifically about fish. Would you know,
I think on
Carl?
a lot of these things, those roll-up research numbers that you can get off of the government websites, like in Ivy's presentation, are an average. And, fish is probably going to vary a lot depending on how it's actually, whether it's farmed and whether it's local or, so for example, with the beef, my partner and I bought a quarter of a cow. Well, okay, beef isn't on average a good climate step, but this particular cow grew up down the road and was butchered locally, and the farmer uses farming methods that actually put carbon into the soil. So that particular beef cattle is very different from another one that grew up on a feedlot and came from Argentina or whatever. So I think sometimes those generalities don't necessarily apply to your particular situation, and you have to look at, okay, if I go and catch a fish, that's one thing. If that fish came from Iceland, that's another thing.
Yeah, very, very good point. I think one good guideline around food is especially is where it's sourced, right? Like if it's local, if you bought some vegetables, fruits, fish somewhere on a local market, we know it came from our area. It didn't need to be transported from far away. That definitely is always a better choice than buying something from far away or from farms where they use all types of stuff that we don't want to really know about. That we don't want to also put in our bodies, and that's typically not very good for us. So yeah, local. Always go for local if you have a choice. Even with fish, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And the most local is your own yard. Grow food.
So yeah, so that's a great tip. Years ago, we were getting this frozen pizza from Trader Joe's because it was vegan. We're like, this is fantastic. And one day I read on the label that it was from Italy. And that was the last time we ever bought that pizza, because a frozen pizza being transported from Italy is just ridiculous. So yeah, pay attention to those labels if you're still buying, prepared foods that way. And even if you're not, even if you're buying ingredients, sometimes we get enamored with it's romantic to buy olives that came all the way from Italy. That's silly, so just really think through the transportation of all these food items is pretty critical. Eventually these things they'll take care of themselves because it just won't be cost effective, and we will stop doing that as a society. But right now we're still in that dumb phase where people haven't figured this out yet. And so it's really helpful for us as consumers to be a step ahead of the game, and then share that information with other people when you recognize that you've been doing something stupid, because being a little bit self-effacing is disarming for people. They're like, oh, I mean, the climate guy was buying frozen pizzas from Italy. Like, what kind of an idiot? But now they're thinking in the back of their mind, maybe I should check the label too. So it helps to share your stories. Is it better to drive cross country in a hybrid than to fly? I know some of these are going to be really technical questions, but like, if you guys have any idea, I'd like to hear.
I think the general answer to that is yes. And of course, if you have more people in the car, that's better. But certainly flying takes a lot more or puts out a lot more carbon than driving an efficient car. Driving an electric car is even better, especially if you can charge it with solar panels.
Okay, question about, will an induction stovetop cooking, will it save energy over natural gas?
That, in general, yes. But again, it depends on where your electricity comes from. So if your electricity comes from a coal-fired power plant, well, there's not nearly as much difference than if your electricity comes from solar panels on your roof. So electrifying is the first step. So definitely we need to move away from using natural gas, which is methane, using methane or propane for cooking. And then the next step is you also have to decarbonize the electric grid or go off grid.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. Building electrification is a big part of my day job. And so I would definitely answer that question with a positive. Induction cooktop is the best thing that you can do. It is more efficient than electric radiant coil, the old style electric stovetops. But in both cases, you're still doing the right thing if you're sourcing it, renewable energy to use it. There's not a tremendous amount of electricity that goes into cooking. It's also not a tremendous amount of emissions that come from our gas cooktops. So it's one of the last steps that you need to do in decarbonizing your house. But there is, Kat, what you talked about, the emissions from burning gas appliance indoors is really harmful.
Yeah.
So you need to not only run that stove, you need to run that vent above it, you need to turn it on high. And what you really are supposed to do is turn that on a few minutes before you start to fire up the gas stove so that the air is actually flowing in that direction. And so it's an invisible health hazard because most people cannot detect that there's that combustion going on inside your kitchen. But that gets all over your home, especially in the wintertime when our homes are sealed up. So get rid of that gas as soon as you can.
Yeah, I've got a whole area on the climate action map on my website about indoor air quality, heat recovery ventilators, and also the toxicity of fragrance in your laundry products. And that's a whole area that is climate related, but it's also related to air pollution and to indoor air quality. But I'm going to push back just a little bit on the idea that electric cooking, that moving from natural gas to electric cooking is maybe one of the last things you need to do. It really depends on your situation. So if you look at the electric usage in my off-grid cabin, cooking is our biggest thing. If we're low on power, that's the thing that we have to give up first. So it just depends on what your other loads are. The internet, for example, is 5 watts. The microwave is 900 watts. The electric stove is 1500 watts. So, you know, one thing that's useful, and I should add this to my map, is to get a kilowatt meter. You can plug any appliance into it. It's like 20 bucks. You can buy one at Home Depot, and you can plug any appliance into it and find out how much power it uses. You can find out how much your laptop uses, probably around 50 watts. You can find out how much power your TV uses, and find out what the big power users are in your household, so you know what you particularly need to work on first.
Yeah, I should have said that the electric stovetops use a lot of power, but the emissions that you save when you eliminate your gas stovetop is the one that, you know, it's important, but it's much more important for that gas water heater and then that gas home heater for reducing those emissions. But you're absolutely right. Like when you go to get one of those induction stovetops, you may find out that not only do you need to run 220, but you need a big amperage switch on your switch box because, you know, they're trying to make those induction stovetops compete with a gas stovetop. And so they put really high BTU level electric burners on them. And so just that satisfaction of saying, I can heat my hot water, that may mean that you need a panel upgrade, you know, so consider how much juice the thing's going to draw. And you don't really need that juice. It's just what it's rated to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. In order to put an electric stove, I did have to upgrade my off-grid system from 120 to 240 volts. But electrifying a house doesn't, I mean, if this is what you do for your day job, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to upgrade your panel. Most of us have plenty of amperage in our panels for an all electric house. Mine just happened to be an off-grid system that was a pretty small electrical panel to start with.
Another one was, are on-demand water heaters less wasteful than tank version?
Well, on-demand water heaters tend to be gas-fired, and so with an electrification project, you're probably going to be moving towards a heat pump water heater if you're going to have an electric water heater. But I would invite you to think about doing a passive solar water heater system. That's what we're putting into our house. They got a bit of a bad reputation 20 years ago, or actually it's more than 20 years ago now. It was back in the 70s, because there was a big government program to give incentives to put in solar thermal systems. And so there were a lot of installers who didn't really know what they were doing. But if you get a good installer and you put in a solar thermal system, it can be the most efficient way to heat water because you're just using sunlight.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we went tankless for two reasons here in Southern California. One was folks wanted to save water. So they thought, well, we only heat the water as we need it, and we won't send a plug of the wrong kind of water through our system. But that only works if your tankless heater is close to your fixture. And so otherwise, what they were meant to do is not have to keep a tank of water hot all the time. The truth is, heat pump water heaters don't work without a tank. So heat pumps need the tank to heat slowly over time. And that's how you draw all that extra latent heat out of the air. So if you want to know what the best water heater solution is for electric, it is definitely heat pump with a tank. Yeah. Oh, Robert asked about a fireplace. What do you guys have? What opinions on fireplaces? Again, old technology, but Kat, you've got a cabin. Did you toy with the ideas of a stove or a fireplace?
We actually, our backup heat is a fireplace. It's a propane fireplace, and the combustion is all outside the airspace in the house. Again, because my partner can't have combustion byproducts in the house, wood-fired or gas-fired wouldn't work for us. I'm trying to get away from burning fuel altogether. So it's strictly going to be a backup as soon as we get our solar thermal system online.
Yeah, generally, if you have heat leaving the system, like through a chimney, then there's a problem with the system, right? And so if a system doesn't have a lot of escape heat, then you're using the energy the best way that you can. And I agree 100%, Kat. Combustion is our enemy here. Even when we have forest fires, that's still a big problem with climate. So, you know, maybe by 2050, we'll sort of get that like fire is evil, unfortunately.
That's why I call it burning fuel. It makes it obvious that it's an old technology, and that all of these, you know, it doesn't really matter whether you're burning propane or burning methane or burning gasoline or burning wood, it's burning fuel. And we need to get away from burning fuel and go to modern technologies like solar cells, which, even though that's what my PhD in, are magic. Just think about you take sand and a little bit of metal and you turn it into something that generates kilowatts of energy. It's amazing, totally amazing, even though I know how it works.
So Kat, going back to the climate action map, I find when I'm trying to figure out like that next thing, the long-term purchase that I need to make for the house or something, that I might spend days, weeks, months researching something, but I'm not in a position to purchase that because my current one hasn't burned out or we don't have the budget for it. And then a year or two later, it's kind of lost. Like, okay, now I've got to act, and all that research, where did I put it? Did you find that the climate action map was a good way to compartmentalize your thoughts and bring you back to what you had looked into before?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's really why I started doing the climate action maps in the first place, almost 25 years ago, was that there were so many different ideas that came to me. And I would research this and I would try that, and maybe this wasn't something I could do right now. Like the first map that I did, I was driving an SUV, a gasoline SUV, 25 miles each way to work every day. I was working on, you know, as an engineer in a factory that was on the opposite side of town. And so I set the intention that I was going to have a bicycle commute or a zero carbon commute. It took me quitting that job, moving to a different city, and taking a job that was within several blocks of my home, and until I actually got down to the bicycle commute. It was probably 5 years later. So that path had a long lead time on it. And then I moved here, and now I'm working from home, and that's a different way to get a zero carbon commute. But some things might be something you can implement almost immediately. Other things are going to take years of planning. Maybe downsizing isn't something you can do right now, but if you start thinking about it 2 or 3 years from now, maybe you could move into a house that's half the size, or share it with another part of your family in order to reduce your carbon footprint per person. Yeah, some of these changes that we need to make are big changes, and they do take quite a lot of lead time and planning.
So, Kat, I just want to point out that I really love what you described about that mama bear feeling of, that thing that you love in the middle. Anger is not really the right word for that, but it is a protective kind of irie, I'm not going to let this go away. And, I think that's really important for all of us to understand that eventually when society gets to that point, not just us, but everybody, the action will come much more quickly. So embrace that feeling of no, I'm not letting this go away, and I'm going to take action. And yeah, I'm going to get defensive about people that don't let me take my action. And I think that that's helpful in becoming contagious, right? If people see that in you and they know that it's not personal or selfish, it's actually a selfless thought, but it's one that they need to take a moment to understand why you're saying it to really get it, and then it becomes, oh wow, okay, that makes sense. What you're asking for is going to help all of us. So I appreciate that. And also that clothing action map, that was fantastic. I was looking more closely at that when you showed that, and I think that's a really good way for people to understand that progression, right? Of at first, here's where you are, but you have to. That's a fantastic way of showing you're not going to do all those steps right away. You're going to start with what seems like the easiest, and eventually you'll be doing something that you maybe never envisioned. Is that possible, right? Try to put the impossible all the way towards the center, because if you can get to there, then and others can emulate that, or you can really understand that that's how it all plays out. That's how we build this future, is a strong right to the center. So I really appreciate that. And maybe your first try at this map doesn't get that far, but maybe that's why you revise them, right? You do them over again.
Yeah, it's totally up to you what the time frame on the map is. What I tend to do is do a new one every year, and so that's, this January time frame was perfect for this, because it is kind of like your New Year's resolutions. But you can do them under any time frame that you want. It could be your 5-year plan. It could be your 10-year plan. It could be this is what I'm doing this quarter, if you've got a lot of actions you're working on at once. Time frame's totally up to you. The other thing is that you're absolutely right that putting something that's a real reach goal in that middle that you're not sure you're ever going to get to is great. Also, I invite you to include things at the outer ends that you've already done, because we're already on these paths. We've already started working. We're not at step one, so you can take credit for things you've already done by putting them on your map. Why not?
I love that, Kat, because then it sort of combines the motivation with the aspiration, right? So motivation is all these things I'm doing and all these things that are within reach over the next 6 months. And then there is my aspirational plan where I want to be and where I will be one day. So I love that.
Yes, and what I really want to do is collect maps from a wide variety of people in a wide variety of contexts, so that we can create a community on this website of people who have climate action maps, who are moving in this direction, and then we can start to challenge each other. You can see what things that other people are doing. Oh, I want to do that. I'm going to add that to my map. And so eventually this will be a situation where We can share information. So you can pop onto my map and say, oh, how does Kat make soap? And then, oh, I'm going to add that to my map. And eventually it'll be, a community of information about how this has worked for real people with real stories and pictures. So if you'd like to volunteer to be one of my families, Marion's already done it, and I think I've got another. Annette is on this call somewhere. It lives in DC and is also going to do it. So I'm looking for people who live in different contexts. Maybe you have a small apartment. Maybe you have family members living with you. Maybe there are things that you've been able to do that don't make sense in my context, like riding public transportation, so that we get a wide variety of people in different contexts.
I would love to volunteer, Kat, and what's coming to my mind is what I would love to put on the map is an aspiration of having an Earth. What is it? The Earth ship, the Earth home. What is it called? The Earth ship.
Earth ship. You're right.
Have you heard about it? The fully sustainable house. That would be amazing.
Well, you put it on there, and it will attract it to you because you'll be looking for it.
Yes.
You put your intention out there, and that's how you get there. I got to my bicycle commute, even though I didn't see how it was going to happen.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, that's how we prioritize things in our lives. Unfortunately, we let television prioritize what our purchases are, and that's silly. Instead, we should be really thoughtful about what we're going to spend our time, our energy, our money on, because we're in a climate emergency, and some of these things can be a lot of fun. But we have to be really thoughtful about how we get to fun in a way that we have no regrets about. So that's fantastic. I'm going to pass this on to Marion now, who has something she wants to share with the two of you.
Well, I do, but before I do that, I would like to, I don't want to put her on the spot, but we have somebody on this call who's working on a very similar project. And I thought I could give her just a second or two to talk about what she's doing. Jill, are you still here?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks, Marion. So I am a climate reality leader. I think I've met some of you all before. And I am trying to help build the climate justice movement by I'm creating a course, Climate Anxiety to Climate Action, because a lot of people now are getting paralyzed by climate change, which then leaves them not wanting to do action, much less the actions in, the writing of the letters or showing up in the streets or what have you. So I am working on that course. So if you know of people that might be interested, feel free to share the link to the sign up sheet for the course. It's going to come out on spring, the first day of spring. And anyway, so that's happening. Another thing is I'm getting certified to do climate wellness coaching, because that's another thing, is that we even have activists that are like, I can't sustain activism. And it's like, well, actually, we're all put on this planet to do this work for life. So it's very important to get your health and wellness in check so that you can do your climate activism. And part of that is to have certain things that you do for climate change, like a lot of the things we've talked about here on this call, as habits, things that you can do on a daily basis as habits. So I've created a 2022 climate wellness habits hot sheet, and that I'm dropping all the links into all the things here. You have to kind of sift through there. Sorry, because I didn't hit enter, but the habits hot sheet you can get, that will get you on the list for updates for the course. So that's available. I am looking for people to do free coaching sessions. So if you feel like you're kind of in a stuck place, or you want some help on wellness and to help you with your climate activism and like figuring out a new plan of attack, if you will, or what have you, I do have a link, climateactivismlab.com. So I need to get 50 sessions for my certification. So I don't want to charge for that service and until I get certified. And then if you're doing stuff that you want to help with the climate justice movement in your community, there's a free climate justice field manual at climatejusticenow.earth. you can download, and a TED Talk, Climate Justice Now, How, if you want to share that. So those are things that you can share with other people, that not just for yourself, but to help build a movement.
Well, thank you so much, Jill, and I'll be sure to include that information in our next NCCA newsletter. So thank you.
Yeah,
And-
you're welcome. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Well, I'd like for everybody to collaborate. We all need to amplify each other's work. So
Well, and I'm using Kat's climate action maps in my course. So with attribution, of course. So
good.
that will help share her great work. So
There,
Great.
please. And I'm a recovering educator myself, so I'd be happy to collaborate on that training too.
a recovering educator.
I was a high school teacher for 17 years, so.
Yeah, I teach at a local university here. And so because of COVID, I've been teaching online for the last 2 years. And I always talk about how people need to use their skill sets to build a movement. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to use my skill sets of online teaching. I'm going to create an online course because we need to deal with climate anxiety. So
Perfect. So let's connect, because I'd be happy to collaborate on that.
So Jill, people are asking you to put your contact info in the chat if you haven't done so.
Sure. This one is the most direct.
And so I want to focus back on our two great speakers tonight.
Thank you.
Both Ivy and Kat. You guys were really, really wonderful. And like Carl said, I've been doing this a while too, and I learned new things too. So that's always great. And as a way of saying thank you to both of you, the North County Climate Change Alliance has purchased something. And Meryl, are you going to pull up the screen? There we go. So what we have done is we have purchased a tree in honor of both of you, one for each of you. And it will be planted in an area here in California that has been burned by the wildfires. So this is our way of saying thank you. So thank you again very, very much. And thank you so much to all of you wonderful people who took time today to spend this time with us. And I hope that you got a lot out of it. And I hope to see you really soon. So I guess we'll all wave goodbye now. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful
you, everybody.
presentation, Ivy.
I'm going
Thanks
to
to our
leave.
speakers. Thank you
I'm
for
going to leave
everyone.
the meeting going for a few minutes so you guys can download the chat file.
Yeah,
This
save the
particular chat file tonight is very rich with an amazing amount of resources and information. So go ahead and download it before you go. And thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Now go write those climate action maps.